But we're online now, so good evening and welcome to our panel discussions on engineering and surgery and intervention. Tonight we're talking more about careers from entrepreneur to enterprise, and my name is Mike Miga, and I'm a professor of biomedical engineering here at Vanderbilt, and I am director of the Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program. For those that don't know anything about the program, it is a professional Master of Engineering program, and it's designed to provide kind of advanced technical skills associated with cutting edge technologies in surgery and intervention. It also provides aspects of professional development as well as enhancing soft skills. We have a capstone design in which you get to actually develop your own design in the domain. And then our hallmark is our clinical immersion experiences. So graduates can and trainees can really get an understanding of the clinical domain and kind of how their technologies really fit within the procedural medicine, the area of procedural medicine and the workflow. So if you're interested, just do a search for Vanderbilt Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program, and it'll likely be right there. So on our panel last time, we looked at the enterprise level of opportunities that are out there. And tonight, we're going to be looking at the kind of highly kinetic entrepreneurial and startup opportunities that are out there. So let me welcome our panelists tonight. So first we have Peter Slawinski. First we have Peter Slawinski, technical lead in robotics and control at Noah Medical, a company that's really pushing the boundaries on robotics imaging and guidance in the lung. And we also have Dr. Jim Stefancic, who is Director of Corporate Development at Cumberland Emerging Technologies, a firm that's really serving as a valuable partner in the startup culture around Nashville. So it's great to have you both. So welcome. I'm very appreciative of you both taking the time out at this time of night and spend about 30 minutes shooting a breeze with us about your experiences. And you both had pretty fascinating careers. So I think our audience will really enjoy that, as well as kind of maybe our potential candidates for our master's program. So also for those out in the audience, there are biographies on the site that you register for this. So if you want to get a chance to take a look, you can read about Peter and Jim on those as well. So with that, I'll kind of start up, if that's okay. So I'll start with you, Peter, a little bit, and tell us about Noah Medical. What's your role there? And the technology is, I looked it up online. It's kind of blew me away. So I'd like to kind of get a sense of that and the patients that you all are trying to help. If you can get a sense of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everyone. And Mike, thanks for having me. I'm very excited about the ESI program. I've been glad to be on the advisory board for over a year now. And I definitely think it's filling a void as we look for candidates in industry. I think this program kind of really fits what we're looking for in a mix of engineering and clinical exposure. So I'm over at Noah Medical. We're a startup based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was founded in 2018. I was fortunate to start there pretty early. It was my first job coming out of PhD at Vanderbilt. And Noah's now grown to around 150 employees. So definitely been kind of great experience coming from transitioning from a lab environment at Vanderbilt, where I was working on a robotic colonoscopy and having a mix of being in a small laboratory, a lot of hands-on work, both technical software development, but also collaborating very closely with a medical center and spending a lot of time speaking with potential end users, being really in the lab, getting hands dirty. And once I moved out here and started at Noah, considering it was so small, it's a pretty smooth transition to also being in a lab, also talking to end users and really applying very much not only the school learnings from Vanderbilt, but also kind of the spirit of building, wanting to build things that really help end users. So I felt like I was set up for success there. Over at Noah, my primary work has been on controls development and software development in my first couple of years. And after about 2 years, I worked into a technical leadership role on the robotics and controls team. And that involves some technical management and mentorship of individuals, risk analysis, documentation. So the product, if you go to noahmed.com, you can read more about Noah. But in short, the product that we've developed is called the Galaxy System. and it's a system for diagnostic robotic bronchoscopy. So this is a potential replacement for manual bronchoscopy, which suffers some drawbacks such as limited reach to lesions in the lung. And when it comes to lung cancer, a lot of lung lesions are in the outer periphery, where it's especially difficult to reach. So some of the robotic technologies can help us get there. If you can look at the industry's one of the industry standards today, if you'd like to get a biopsy of the lung, you could undergo a procedure called percutaneous biopsy, where following a CT scan, literally a needle would be pierced through your chest to get that biopsy. So there's a push in the space, including what Nova Medical is doing in trying to avoid the percutaneous approach, which can lead to complications such as lung collapse, which is called pneumothorax. So I think the values that NOAA brings are really integration. So like I mentioned, a lot of our focus up from leadership to all the engineering staff is really thinking about what is being in the mind of the end user, what can we do to help? So integration, having easy workflow, simple software, not many cables, that's super important to us. I have some imaging technologies in our system. I've developed a proprietary, what we call TILT technology or tool in lesion tomography, which helps correct for CT body divergence. And to answer your question, like who is the end, who really is the end benefiter of the technology? That's really folks who have who are just learning about having cancer and their early stage. Right, so our goal is to help people learn early, and which can drastically help improve survival rates.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the wave of growth that you've had at Nova Medical has been incredible. I think we've done a lot of work in imaging with respect to the lung in terms of really understanding bronchial pathways and things like that. But the kind of control that you all are kind of bringing to the game is, I think it's pretty impressive. And I think if people get a chance to take a look, you should take a look. Jim, I just go to you. So Cumberland Emergent Technologies, what's that all about in terms of how does it impact Nashville? Kind of what's your role in that organization? And you have any, success story examples of kind of what the partnership's been like for you all? It's been pretty interesting area.
Right. Yeah. So thanks for having me as well, Mike. And I just joined the ESI advisory board recently, having gotten my PhD at Vanderbilt many moons ago in image guided surgery and biomedical engineering. It's great to be able to be in Nashville and stay engaged with you and the others. I think that's what's made the program very successful is the graduates that are able to work with the students, and always happy to do that. So I've had an interesting career in Nashville. Nashville's not really known as a med device or med tech town, but I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about Pathfinder, which was a company that I co-founded with you. But I've moved on to the pharma space. Yeah, I've moved on to the pharma space, and basically taken a lot of the skills I got not only as a grad student, but through my business work, through my entrepreneurial work, to kind of be on. I don't have to take as much risk now because I'm getting old and got kids and mortgage and all that stuff. But what we focused on still is tech transfer, which is a big part of a lot of these products that come out on the market. We really focus, except we're focusing on drug discovery and drug development. So you're talking a much longer timeline to get a lot of these technologies to market, but oftentimes you run into some of the same challenges, regulatory challenges. Peter talked about risk analysis. All these things with drugs. Just imagine on a different scale. And so my job is to kind of try and identify those really early stage risks, especially in working with the academics on these drugs. And I should say they're technologies. We work on a variety of things, and I'm going to give you an example here. But the key is obviously to try and move these projects forward to create value as you move forward. And a lot of that is, who's the end user and how are they going to use your drug? You think, oh, well, you're just popping a pill, right? No, I mean, it's more complex than that. So like, for example, I can't get away from imaging and image guidance, which is great. The drug that I've been most focused on for the last year is actually a technetium labeled fibrinogen. So fibrinogen is a clotting drug. And this is a project that came out of the Department of Surgery at Vanderbilt. The chairman of surgical sciences, Dr. Seth Karp, he came up with this idea of being able to radio label fibrinogen and use SPECT CT imaging to find GI bleeds, which are a real challenge. So I've gotten to keep my hands in the imaging cookie jar, but really this is a drug, right? I mean, we're taking an FDA approved product, this fibrinogen. We're working with a multi-billion-dollar partner that makes the fibrinogen, and we're radio labeling this. But we have some of the same challenges. It's like, okay, if a patient comes in with the GI bleed, right? How serious is it? The hospital obviously has to have SPECT capability. They have to be able to radio label this. How is the kit prepared? I mean, there's still a lot of questions you got to consider. And a lot of it still revolves around imaging and surgery and what kind of the next steps are for the patient. So been really lucky to do that. And I guess what I've come to realize is with any kind of graduate program that you're in, if you're in engineering, biomedical engineering, the end user becomes so critical, and even more critical in the fields that the three of us work in that you're talking about patients' lives and patients' well-being, and there's always a cost associated with this, a cost benefit, and you have to think about who's going to pay for this, right? Who's going to pay for these devices? If as Peter was talking about, if percutaneous is the simple, easy way to do it, how do you convince them to use a more complex device? Why is it better? What's the return on investment? That's not always easy to understand, but the clinician's perspective is more and more important in that now. Yeah. At least we hope in America that's going to be the case. We know there's clinician burnout and things, but the clinician has to be front and center in that. So that's why I think it's great that a program like yours exists, where you can engage on both sides.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the problems are getting so complicated. They really do blend a variety of technology, which is why we always talk about the skill sets that we call them our disciplines within the domain. Which imaging is one, but we also have therapeutics, robotics and devices, modeling and simulation, image processing analysis, data science, and of course surgery and intervention. So all of those things working together, and it is funny how you kind of have different technologies that come together to kind of come up with a solution. And like you said, you may have something that looks easy, a percutaneous stick or something like that, but there may be complications associated with that, which is why they take kind of bronchial kind of maneuvers, so they don't have to collapse the lung and things like that. So there are lots of different aspects, and you kind of blend, what happens functionally speaking, and then kind of what the technologies are to kind of get you there in the simplest way and the most adoptable way. And it is a tough problem. So going back to you, Peter, you kind of mentioned a couple of things, but you did do this, as you were saying earlier today. I think you're the first employee that was at Noah Medical when you kind of jumped ship in there in terms of leaving Vanderbilt. So I guess, what was that experience like, being kind of at that kind of ground level, and then kind of as you kind of matured in there, can you give us a sense of what was kind of the challenging things, and kind of what was the most exhilarating things that kind of happened in that small period of time right there?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a little scary. I think just starting before actually starting at the startup, as graduates, as graduates of the future graduates of the ESI program, I think everyone has to make a choice. What type of company do you want to go to? What do you want to work on? What do you want to learn? Just to share a little bit of my experience, I was very much thinking about, I knew I wanted to apply my learnings, and with a startup, I was a little nervous about going someplace where, if I'm really the only person there, then what am I going to learn? And do I know enough to be able to really apply what I know and actually make something happen? So definitely, as it happened with me with Noah Medical, there were folks around that were I knew I could learn from, and I knew it was a safe bet for me that way. And it's just a great time or ideal time in life for me to take a risk. But yeah, definitely just want to put on folks' radar that as you go through school, as you are being hands-on, definitely, I think if you're liking wearing many hats and like to kind of get your hands dirty, I think startup life was a good fit for me.
There's a lot of team building with that too. You have a lot of folks that come on and you start working with them. I think it's daunting, but I think it sounds exciting to me as well. In terms of just having that exposure and even being involved in the hiring process, kind of seeing how people fit. I mean, from the perspective of a faculty member, we do the same thing with our faculty members. We kind of see how people fit, and it's kind of fun to kind of be in that role.
Yeah, definitely. Even the concept of thinking about what is a company culture and how do we build it, and how do you make sure that it's good when there are 5 people in the room, and how do you make sure that it's going to stay good when there are 20, 30, 50. That was definitely fun. Just kind of looking back, and honestly, a little bit still applies. I think an exciting aspect for me, just a kind of a blanket answer to the original question, is just abundance of opportunities. So
That's
if
great.
you join a small company, small team, even if it's a small team at a big company, if it's fairly easy to become a point person on whether it's one thing or maybe even 10 things, depending on the scale of what you're working on. So there's a lot of ownership to be had. And whenever taking ownership, I have to strike a balance of, being comfortable with what you're doing, but at the same time, owning a lot to be able to learn more. Like I mentioned this in my last answer, but honestly, having the chance to work closely with the Vanderbilt Medical Center, spending a lot of time with end users, and just like really focusing on what does the end user need, I think was very helpful, and that's like a skill set I very much applied. And one thing I wanted to note on that was that as engineers, we may have in our minds a certain what we think is a recipe for a great product or something that's going to really solve whatever problem we think exists. But that actually might not be that. Your assumptions may not be true. And unless you talk to 1, 10, 20 potential users and really learn, validate, are you really working on the right problem? And what is the workflow in the medical procedure, 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after? Maybe those things are also important. And that can really change the scale of what you want to work on. So just coming into a small team and not being too laser focused on the one answer, but keeping a broad eye on like, how do I solve the problem holistically for you? That was something I really enjoyed.
Yeah, customer discovery is such a huge thing with all these things, and I think that's what you're getting at too. I think, and it is something that the more perspectives clinically you have, the better off you are. In addition to even the folks that, like you said, around the clinic, in some sense, the ones that are supportive, the nursing staff can be extremely helpful. So there's lots of things like that. Switching back to you, Jim. I mean, you're kind of entrepreneur. You're on the partner side at this point, but you basically have been on both sides of the equation. You've been both driving and seeing what's happening in terms of trying to get technology out there. And then you've been kind of on the more supportive side, I guess. So I guess what's that role been like for you? What have you learned in the process of being on both sides of the equation?
Yeah, I'm probably going to show our age here a little bit, Mike, but like when we started Pathfinder, it's almost 20 years. I can't believe that. It was, I
was 15 at the time.
Yeah. That's right. We were just prodigies, right? But I mean, it was, there was no customer discovery. As a matter of fact, I teach entrepreneurship at Belmont University, where I got my MBA here in Nashville. And it's pretty easy to describe image guided surgery. I've done it so many times. It's the elevator pitch. You can explain the difference between different cameras and the range scanner and all the other stuff we had, and the challenges of going in the ORs, like you said, the support staff looking at us like these crazy Pathfinder guys are back. Like they burn a hole through your head, looking at you. So
You never did out there, disclosure.
it was quite a bit different. So to hear, it's refreshing to hear that nowadays it's just common. It's common to do customer discovery. As a matter of fact, what I've learned over the years and what's nice about some of the programs that exist here, here in Nashville, unlike where Peter is on the West Coast, in San Francisco, we don't have as much venture capital here. People pursue grants, they pursue kind of more non-traditional funding. And even these institutes like NIH and NSF, which I understand in your program, you're exposing the students to these. They have a small business grant program, and customer discovery has become front and center, especially for NSF, which is our original funding for Pathfinder back in the 90s came from NSF. So I think that's really important. And that's really what I try and stress to the entrepreneurs now being on this side is that, look, there's like 100 things that you can do. And I can tell you probably the 95 things you shouldn't do. The problem is I can't tell you out of those other 5, if I knew which one to do, I'd be, living on a beach somewhere and retired if I knew always what to do, right? But you got to kind of cut out those like 95 things and get focused on what are the key things you need to do. And it almost always revolves at some point around the end user. Mm-hmm. I mean, simple stuff like what is the, like the workflow, like Peter mentioned, like before and after the case. Who's thinking about that when you're, coding stuff, right? You're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I just want to get the thing to work, right? And so, those are really key aspects of pretty much any, most of what I do. I tend to gravitate when I help people with these grants towards medical device, biomedical engineering here. And so they're more tangible things that you can discuss and say, okay, how's this really going to work in the OR? Is it going to be, can you put it close to the surgical field or not? What are the surgeons going to say about that? Have you bothered to ask? Or are you just assuming you're going to be able to take this in and just set it up any way you want? So those are really important questions that that people just are like, oh yeah, I guess I should think about that. And that's where the whole customer discovery, the interviews, the formal process comes in, that these different programs now, we have one at Vanderbilt too, the formal kind of customer discovery process, it can be a formal process, which is great.
Yeah, so kind of building off that, you both have mentioned quite a bit about, the clinical contact and the customer. And one of the things we do is a lot of clinical immersion work. And I guess I'd like to get kind of both your viewpoints on this, maybe starting with you, Peter. So when you were here, I'm not sure exactly how much clinical immersion you had. You were not in my lab, so I don't know for certain. But I guess, the value of clinical immersion, kind of what it means. Even I know there's an aspect of talking with physicians, but what's the value of seeing procedures and kind of really looking at those workflows? And I'll ask the same thing to Jim in terms of when you were here and what your experience is with that. What do you think of that, Peter?
I think it's having clinical immersion is a very, I don't want to say necessary, but a very important prerequisite for getting up and running effectively in the field. During my graduate studies, I spent quite a bit of time sitting in on colonoscopy procedures and understanding. Sorry, I'm not. I'm trying to think of best words to use, but I think building empathy on the potential user, or at least learning how to ask questions, how to best understand what a potential end user is thinking. Sometimes asking a direct question is not the best way. Building some insight and perspective on that was very useful for me. And definitely it's a strong suit for several positions that, frankly, we look for. Like if there are individuals that do have exposure to thinking about the end user when developing their technical solutions, that's no doubt a plus.
Yeah, I mean, for colonoscopy, observations are probably everything with respect to kind of the devices they use, at least for it. I mean, I know, we just had our colonoscopy, one of our clinical speakers today. Actually, it was this past Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, just this understanding the ergonomics of the devices that they use, kind of the complexity of the device itself in terms of the way it holds it and that kind of thing. It's just one of those things that you really can't. You have to watch that use in order to kind of get a good sense of the understanding of what they're doing, and then maybe perhaps how you can improve it. Jim, what do you think? I guess in terms of your experiences.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Peter said. I mean, I think the beauty of Vanderbilt, and part of what appealed to me to come there, having done my undergrad at Johns Hopkins, was that the medical center was right next to the School of Engineering. We were wheeling our device over there, on a hand cart held together with duct tape and bungee cords, even if it's raining, you go in the tunnels, man. You go in the tunnels below the hospital. I'll never forget those times, because they were like some of the best times of being an engineering student and getting access to that. We kind of learned the hard way a little bit once we were out, and we engaged with with different types of surgeons, physicians. You get all the personalities, that's part of life, right? And we learned kind of the cowboy surgeons versus the meticulous surgeons and other things like that, and trying to make a device that would appeal to all of them. So just being able to put all that in perspective. But at Vanderbilt, you're going to get, because of what you created, Mike, and Vice has created, is you have that collaboration that it doesn't exist everywhere. It was clear to us when we were out with Pathfinder in the space at different hospitals, prominent hospitals, that had engineering schools, academic medical centers, that it didn't exist everywhere, and there was a reputation around that. So I think you have to have that, and I think even now, it's way more important and way more understood to be part of the challenges of getting a device to market, as I said, and certainly academia is fueled by grants, and the granting agencies are aware of that, and so I think that's a huge advantage. So students are going to get exposure to that, whether they end up writing grants or not. They're going to get exposure to that part of product development, let's say, beyond just just the nuts and bolts engineering, and that'll serve them well in their careers. Yeah. What Peter was talking about earlier with the startups, one thing to add there is, he mentioned the diversity and being, and I always tell people, look, if you go work for a startup, you should expect that. You should expect to be exposed to a lot of that. If you're not, there's probably a problem, especially if it's, you're less than 10 employees. If you're not exposed to that, and there's not transparency around that when you're taking that kind of risk, that's not a startup I would want to work for. Yeah. And so, that's something to consider. And then bringing the skills you have to the table. You want to be a contributor. It's hard to be that on day one. I'm sure it sure took Peter some time to settle into that, it sounds like, but he thrived. And that's really important, is to find where you can make a significant difference, but also learn and be exposed to the other things. So that's really important as well.
I think with the clinical immersion aspects to it, what I've noticed is over the years, it's an evolving thing. And so I think it's amazing, keeping your kind of a little bit of a foot in that pool a little bit, in terms of understanding how things. An example for that would be, Pathfinder came along before robotics did, and not before, but like in some sense it was before robotics took off as a field. And I think what I've seen with robotics, and actually your technology is a great example of that, Peter, this integration with robotics and imaging, like the whole guidance world is kind of now being kind of blended together in other organs that liver was there had been no guidance systems back then. And it was, talking a long time ago, but like in a short period of time, 10 to 15 years, the appreciation for integrating that kind of information, it really has been ushered in by advanced kind of control of your tools, which is what robotics
Mhm.
kind of does for you. And so, it is something where as you see things evolve, and I think if you step, I mean, I like going back to the ORs all the time because I learn more and more about how things are changing and what the expectations are, and even what the skill sets the surgeons are. And so it's something where I find it exhilarating in that sense. I keep on learning every time I have my class. I learn more and more each year. Even if I have the same instructors come in from year to year, there's always new information coming in, which I think is which is amazing. But that's great. So I think a couple things. So with regards to moving forward in your careers and kind of the skill sets that you kind of learned in your PhD and kind of how they translated to kind of your career. I guess, we have this kind of unusual skill set that we're trying to develop at Vanderbilt. I mean, what's your viewpoint of the horizon kind of? I'm ask both of you again, this. We've only got a little bit of time. Actually, let's probably end it on this question. What's your kind of feeling on the horizon for this type of area in development for surgery, intervention, kind of engineering, kind of blending in it? Do you think it has some good legs to it? And as far as, what's your thoughts on that, I guess? I'll start with Jim this time.
Yeah, I think, well, I think obviously healthcare, we're at a crossroads in healthcare. I mean, you read about it all the time, you see it all the time. And you're going to have to really show the value of technology that's coming into the market. I mean, there has to be a change, right? I've been out of the surgical intervention space for a while now, but obviously just follow it and get to meet with you and meet the students and just curiosity and understanding like the robotic space. But I think that that's going to be a huge part of it. And I hope, this is more of a hope than what I think will happen, is that the clinicians are at the center of that. And when I say clinicians, I mean, like you said, the support staff, everybody. My wife's been a nurse at Vanderbilt now for 28 years. So I've seen, I've heard it all from her about, how things have changed. And so it's, that's going to be really, really critical. And I think companies are going to have to, the companies in the med tech space that are going to make it are the ones that are going to be thinking about that from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And not just how many patents we have or what the technology does. So
yeah, it's
people
really
that are exposed to that are going to be extremely valuable, that can communicate with the surgeon and be able to deal with like Peter said, getting in the OR, knowing when to ask the questions, being able to process that information. You can learn. That's a skill you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
It involves some emotional intelligence along the way, but students can learn that, and they're going to learn that.
Healthcare costs have changed quite a bit. And I think it's really changed the landscape. Peter, last minute here. Can you think about what do you think about the horizon also?
Yeah, I think the future for the industry is bright. We're coming up on, or we're at around 20 some years of surgical robotics being an industry that's really alive and thriving. There are a lot of technologies now kind of competing to get out in the market, and there's so many tough problems to solve. I'm definitely glad to be, starting my career in this industry. I think there's a lot of promise. There are a lot of folks that are fresh graduates that I see very excited about these technologies. A lot of new up and coming. Like it seems like every 2 weeks I read an article about a new med tech startup that's doing great things. Some even from Nashville, and probably from future ESI graduates. We'll see more in the future. I think it's a great industry, and I'm very excited about this program.
That's great. Thanks for both of you. So I think that's about all we have time for tonight. So I'm a little bit over. Sorry about that, folks, but we started a little awkwardly in terms of starting up here. So I'd like to thank both Peter and Jim for taking the time to kind of sit with us and chat with us about kind of their experiences and a little bit about the entrepreneurial startup culture Again, also serving on our advisory board, much appreciated. It really helps us kind of shape the degree, and so I really do appreciate that. I also like to, of course, thank the audience for listening out there. I always add as my last disclaimer, so I'm no expert at this MC stuff. I'm just a researcher, just like everybody else is an engineer. So if I fumbled and I bumbled, sorry about that. And like I always tell my kids, I'll do better next time. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.